Hello, welcome to Guided Project 4-3. This is a huge turning point in our study of Microsoft Access in this Microsoft Access in Practice learning series. This is the point where we get away from the behind the scenes work that we've been doing so far, and we actually start building what the user sees. In the past couple of videos, we've been dealing with how to lock down our tables so that things can't be changed unless we want them to be changed, making sure that people can't delete things because something is related to it, and we could have all these cascade problems. We've even talked about designing these queries that will allow you to go get the table so that people can only access the information indirectly. Now we're at the point where it's time to interact with the user. We are going to create two different things in this project which will allow the user to modify the data in our database without being given access to the tables themselves. One of them that we'll see near the end of the project are the forms, which you use to enter data or simply review data if you want to restrict the editing feature. Or what we'll do at the very start, one of the other things we'll do is the report, which is how you see the data that you're going to be storing in your database in a way that displays it more like you would have typed up a document and created a what's in my database review sheet. Let's hop over to SimNet, which is where everything starts. As always, if you need to pause the video and catch up with where I am or take a chance to do things for yourself, that's fine. The series is designed so that you can do that. When you're ready, you can scroll down to Access, Chapter 4, Guided Project 4-3. We'll see the same familiar things here that we usually have. We have our instruction sheet, which we will open with Adobe Acrobat. You can keep the two open separately. I even recommend printing it, but I will open mine full screen at the top so that we'll be able to see the instructions as I work. The other is our start file, which I will click to open in Microsoft Access, and I will put that at the bottom of the screen, and this is where we're actually going to be working. There's a couple steps that we should be used to by now. The first is that we have to do a save as so that we can put it into our documents folder. I'm clicking documents just to make sure that's where I am. And then I'm checking the name. It added my name at the front to personalize it. Remember, if your instructor has a different name, use that one. And then I click save. Now we have a version that's ready for us to modify, and I will enable the content. And we are ready to go. Let me get our instructions back on screen. Quick review of what we're doing. We're dealing with an animal shelter. They're attempting to find owners for the pets that come into the shelter. They've already created the database tables and a query to be able to find which pets don't have an owner yet. What they want is they want to put together a report so that on a single sheet, or well, with a single print button press, they are able to get a printout of which pets still need to be adopted. We're also going to create a form. Apparently they're looking for a way to do data entry here so that we can flip through their records that way. We're also going to take a little time to look at things that we can add to our form so that we can use some very Excel-like features to analyze our data as we print out the report. So it's a relatively small skill set that's added, and this is a very fast project. There are 16 steps, and the last 3 are all saving and uploading the file. And we've done the first 3 already. We've downloaded the start file, resaved it, enabled it, and now we're just going to open the Pets Without Matching Owners report in Layout View. So I'm going to go to the reports. Now be careful, there's a query with the same name, so make sure you're opening the right item even if it has matching names. We want the report. I'm just going to double click it to open it, and this is what the report looks like. I do notice that it says Layout View, but I'm going to stay in this view for a second so that you can see what a report is. We have some banner at the top. This is like the header in a Microsoft Word document where you might put your name or your running header. This is going to be at the top of the document on the very first page where we print it. Then we have this row that tells us what information we'll find below. This is a pet ID number. This is the pet's name. This is the type of animal it is. This is the breed of that animal. So we have this label, and it's worth mentioning that every page that we print out, the label set will appear. So if we have another record appear at the top of page 2, we'll get to see these headers at the top of page 2 and 3 and 4, however many it takes, so that we'll always be able to see what information is lining up with which column at the top. If you scroll down far enough, now I'm just dragging this to the end, you'll see we have at the very bottom of the report, we have a page number here. So we have a header, here we have a footer, and in between we have a whole bunch of records that tell all the different pets. Now notice that this is only providing some of the pets. We're using a query that allows us to look up only the pets that haven't been matched with an owner. So because we're drawing our information out of a query instead of the original list of all pets, we are going to have only a subset of what's in the pets table. So we're getting our information in directly, and you'll notice that our pet ID starts with number 2. Number 1 apparently found an owner already. If we go down below, we'll see the next one is 4. So apparently pet number 3 has already found an owner. So we're only looking at some of the pets because our information is coming from a query that filters out any pets that have already been adopted, which is a good thing. Here we're finally able to switch over to layout view, and you'll see it's going to look almost identical, only this will allow us to change things like how wide the columns are and where they're positioned. We're just going to move where things are laid out on this form. You can start leaning on this lower right corner to start making your switches. You'll see that each of these options has a different layout. I want layout view, so I can click the third one, and it looks almost identical, only the property sheet opens up. It might not open up on yours. I'll close it so we can see the whole page. And you'll see we can click on individual boxes where the information appears. Last time if I clicked on it, it was just blinking like I could edit the number itself or the name itself. Now it's clicking the whole boxes because we're talking about layout instead of the actual contents. So lots of concepts in the very easy step 4. The important thing to know is that you're at this point creating a document that's going to pull information out of your database and display it in the nice way that you see down here. This is going to be kind of Microsoft Word-like. We're going to start switching the way that the page is set up. We want to change it so that instead of being in the up and down portrait kind of way that you normally print things, we want it to print side to side in landscape view. You'll notice that when we're in a form, we get a whole bunch of options up here at the top. Normally we have 1, maybe 2 tabs when we have to customize something. When you're doing a layout, there are 4 tabs that you can choose from: Design, Arrange, Format, and Page Setup. All of these relate to modifying the report. So almost everything we do when we're talking about reports will be modified from up here. In order to do landscape, you might remember back from Word, this is the kind of thing that you want to page setup for, and it's going to be the same thing over here. How do we want it laid out? Currently we say up and down. We want the side-to-side option landscape, and watch what happens over here. The moment that we click landscape, the page gets a lot bigger. We have all this empty white space over here. So portrait, it was wide, but as you went down, only so many would fit on the sheet. I switched to landscape. We have a bunch more space to put our information for each record, but because we're going side to side, then the up and down isn't going to be as high. We're going to fit less of these in that way. So all that really matters is how do we take advantage of this extra space. And that's what we're going to do next. We're going to try to take advantage of all this extra white space we made by going the wide way. And we're just going to change how much fits here. All of this could start taking advantage of this shape. The wider we make it, then the further down we go, that can be reduced. Notice even here we have 3 lines for that type of home I'm looking for. We're going to make a change in the width of this to begin with. So we need to make sure that we're on the Report Layout Tools Arrange tab. Time to start arranging the things on the page. So I click this, and then we want to select a text box here. So I've chosen this text box. It says specifically we want the Why I'd Make a Great Companion, and it says text box. Now notice up here where it says Why I'd Make a Great Companion, that's actually called the label. So if we wanted the label, we'd click up here. If we want the text box where the actual text goes, you have to click there. Now we actually want both. In order to get both, we can hold down Shift. Notice this is a change than in most software, and little changes like this are what makes some new software lessons frustrating for people. Normally we hold Control when we want to hit multiple things. In this case, we're going to hold Shift, and we'll click the label. Shift here is just something that you're going to have to remember. There's no real way of memorizing that. That's what you need to do. But you hold down Shift and you click the label, and now you have both the text box and the label chosen. We're going to change both of their widths. We do this by using what's called the property sheet. And we've seen this before when we created tables and we had individual lines that had properties. We've done that in a couple different places. We're going to use the property sheet here for these objects on our report. Anytime you want the property sheet, you just hit F4 on the physical keyboard. This is the top row of that place where you're typing with your fingers. This is the physical object, not on screen. So we hit F4, and that property sheet comes back. I'm going to scroll a little bit to the side so that you can see all that empty white space we have. It tells us that we want to change the width to 3.1. Now here we're already at the Format tab, and that's usually the default, and you'll see the characteristics of this box in its various aspects here. We could do all, and we could see absolutely everything that's included. That would include what's listed under Other, what's included under Event and Date and such. But a quick way to modify these text boxes, hop over to the Format tab. When you read down, the most important ones will be put in top. Sometimes it seems like it would be great if they were in alphabetical order, but it's actually really nice when you get things from the very top. And the width is currently set to 2.29 inches. So basically this is 2.3 inches from the left side of it to the right side of it. We want to make it wider. It says we want 3.1. So we type 3.1 in. We hit enter to make it official. And you will have seen, if you were watching closely, this area jumps. Here's what it looked like before. Here's what it looks like after. There's a before, there's an after. And you'll notice, even though we don't have as much up and down space to work with, we actually gain some back, because when we make it wider, this type of home I'm looking for that I pointed out earlier used to be 3 lines. It's wide enough now so it makes 2. So we're actually going to make up some space and take advantage of this big white area that we had when we changed to landscape view. We're going to make another change in this, and this is in the left property. We'll find left down here. It's currently set to 5.66667. The left property is how far left do we go before we draw this box. If we were right up against the edge over here, then left would be 0. As we push it across the page, that number goes higher and higher. What we want to do is we want to push it even further to the left so that it moves closer to the edge of the paper now. We'll move it into that white area that we made. They want us to choose a left property of 6.8. That's over an inch higher than our 5.666 something that we have now. So add that 1 1/3 by typing 6.8 and watch, but when you hit enter or tab, watch what happens over here. It moves it over to the side. So now we have a little edge over here, but not all that much. We have a bunch of white space over here now that we can use to balance out the remaining columns. So I've changed its width to make the thing wider. We've changed its left to push it over to the right. We increased its left in order to push it to the right, you might say. And now we're going to start dealing with some of the other categories here so that we can take advantage of this space that we've made here. You'll see some of them, like gender, doesn't even fit. The pet name gets cut off a little bit. We're just going to better use that space. So the first thing we're going to do now, according to them, they say in step G we want to select a text box in the breed column. So this says the text box. Here's breed. So we choose its text box. Next, they say we're going to choose the label also. Remember, we're using Shift now instead of Control to choose 2 things at once. And now we have them both, and we are going to change their width. Currently, They're 1 2/3 of an inch. We're going to change it to 1 and just under a third, 1.3. And you'll see it gets a lot smaller. Now this causes a bit of a problem because Chihuahua now gets cut off partway through the word. So we're going to change that also. The height characteristic over here talks about how tall both of these are. We want to make the text box taller. We don't want to change how breed appears because that's the same height as all the rest. But we do want to make this taller so that it hangs down here and we can move the word Chihuahua down to the second row. So in order to do this, we have to unselect, to deselect the label and just work with the text box, which is easy. You just click in the text box itself. Now the label will stay the same, but we're going to be able to change the height of this so that we can fit Chihuahua in a second row. Currently, the height is set to 0.2292. We're just going to change it to 0.5, so it's a little over twice that. And you'll see that there's room for Chihuahua down in the second row of this text box. One other thing that we're going to change, color right now is relatively thin. It looks good when we say tan, but as you scroll down the page, white gets a little bigger. Now you have black and white. Some of these brown tabby, we can't even see. So we're going to have to make that one a little bit wider. We choose its text box. And then we want the label too. Whenever possible, you'll keep them both as wide. And now we need the width, albeit a little repetitive. We do 1.5 here, tab, and that gets a little bit bigger. Now I'm going to close the property sheet. They say you can press F4 to it. I usually do it in a way that you can see on screen. We're closing that so we can see the entire thing from the left edge to the right edge. And we just want to move this. We could just grab it and drag it, but then we'd have to worry about if we accidentally dragged up a little bit, if we'd accidentally drag down a little bit. So the physical arrow keys on your keyboard will be a quick way to move things around. The arrow keys are located right between the section of letters that you type and the section of numbers on the right edge of your keyboard. There's really the letters area that you type on, and then there's a number pad on the side where you can type your numbers. The arrows will be right at the bottom of that region in between. If you are uncertain, you can usually find a block of 6 keys on your physical keyboard, and the bottom one in the middle says end. The up arrow will be right below end. So when you find these physical arrow keys on your keyboard, you can move things in a very precise way just by clicking however many times you want to in order to position things from left or right by just using the left or right buttons. In the instructions up top, they say click the right arrow key on your keyboard 15 times. So heading down here, I'll just go and hit the button 15 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's our new position. So just by using the arrow keys on your physical keyboard, you're able to reposition these objects without having to worry about the whole up and down mess that you get when you're dragging. And then they give us one last instruction, which is really up to us at this point. They say using this diagram up here, which I'll scroll down to as a guide, you might want to adjust the widths and the placements of the pet name, type, age, and gender columns that we have been dealing with in the past. So it's up to us to decide how thick to make these, and we might try to imitate this. This is one of those times where watching the video gives you a minor disadvantage because you'll get to see how I repeat this process over and over again. I'm just going to take the gender text box and its label, and I'm going to increase its size a little bit. I could go to the property sheet for this and try to type a numeric size, but I don't really know what size I want. I'm just going to make it big enough so that I can see the whole word gender. In order to do this, I'll speed up the process. Instead of using property sheets and guessing numbers, I'm just going to point to the right edge of it, hold down the mouse button, and I'll make it wider. I can't quite see the full word gender, so I'll make it a little wider. Looks good to me. and then leaving a little bit of space, I'll hit the right arrow so that I can move it over. Age, and I'll hold down Shift to get the label. That looks good to me. I'll just move it over a little bit to make room for other things. Breed, and the breed label, I'll move over a little bit, which looks like what they did in the example up top. We have about the same proportion of space between these. Now we say type, and I get the label. I'll move those over a little bit. How is it for the other records? Well, rabbit just fits. Dog, cat. It might be that this is totally fine. If we just have dog, cats, and rabbit, it's a fine size. If the adoption agency also had tortoises, obviously we'd have to make this a little bit bigger. Then the pet name, pet ID sounds fine. The label fits there, the number certainly fits there. But we have this extra space, so why not take advantage of it? I'm going to move these over a little bit since we don't need the extra space. And I'm going to give all that extra space to name. I just grab that right edge of it, drag it over, and when I let go, there's enough space so that longer pet names could fit in here. So I followed their guide, and when you look up top, it looks kind of the same. I might have given a little more space to type. I can move that back over. But this is an approximate stage 2. When you submit your project for grading, you're not going to have to worry if it's precisely at the exact fraction of an inch that they want. As long as it's close, you're going to get full credit. And I have tested this to make sure that that advice is true. This is a very approximate thing that'll just give you some artistic experience. So now we're going to scroll back down to where we were. It told us to change these various things in step Q. Step R, save the report. There's lots of ways that you can save. Choose whichever you like. Control S works. The file save option works. I always choose the most visual. And we have saved our report. We're done with the first of 3 pages. But more importantly, we're through one of the most detailed steps of the project. Next, we're going to edit the header and the footer sections. The header and the footer sections are these. This one is the slightly bluish gray up top, and that appears only at the very top of the first page when you print this out. The footer is the one at the bottom, where you have the page number, and that appears at the bottom of each page you print. Currently it says page 1 of 1 because we're viewing it all at once. But if it took 6 pages to print this on paper, it would number all 6 pages. What we want to do is modify the header and footer sections. So we're going to go to the Design tab, which is where we're already at, because we're going to get back into design mode here. We're going to recreate what we're looking at here. We're going to click the text box where we see date. And all they want us to do is, now that we've switched from portrait to landscape mode, move it to the outer edge. I'm just going to hold the right arrow key down. Just be careful when you do this, because when you get to the end, really slow down. That's as far as I'm going. If you try that trick, like when you're at the gas pumps and you try to not let go of the gas pump until you hit 0, 0 and you have an even dollar amount, that's going to screw things up if you try that over here, where you just hold down the right arrow button and try to let it go at the perfect time. If you go too far, it's going to make a mess for you. So take that step slowly. So we've moved that over. It's now along the right edge. Now we're going to click on the title. Now we have that box, and they say we should change it to pets available for adoption. So we just click in it a second time, delete what's there, and type the new name. Pets available for adoption. I'm going to hit Tab to make my change official, and you'll see that the title is changed too. So these things work just the way the text boxes do on their own, only they're not text boxes. They're called something different. So it's just a change in name for the labels. It just works the same way. I've clicked outside of it to do those changes. Now we're going to go down to the footer, and we're going to change the way that the page number text box is. You could sit there and you could sit here doing the down arrow thing outside. You could do the scrolling with the arrows, but the quickest way, when you have to go all the way down to the bottom, grab this bar on the right side and just drag it all the way to the bottom. That'll save you a ton of time. And we want the footer. Specifically, we want the page number text box. So here's the text box where the page number appears. It tells us we just want that over on the right. Now that's a much longer trip than the other one that used to be almost at the right edge, but this one is headed towards the right. So we're just going to do this. Don't get fancy with it. At the end, just keep hitting it individually so that you don't accidentally push it too far off the edge. One more, and I'm right on the edge there. So we've modified the footer, and we've modified the header. So that means we've completed step 7. So now it's time to think. We have things displaying all the data perfectly. The only thing that we really want to tweak at this point is let's change the order that things are presented in. Now you can do different things with the orders by sorting tables. You can sort your queries in certain ways, but we want the form to take care of this. So we're going to use grouping and sorting right on the form so that when it receives the data and goes to put it into this final report, it will rearrange it. What we want it to do is we want it to group each animal type together. So all the dogs will appear, all the cats will appear together, all the rabbits will appear together. We want it to sort it, and it doesn't currently do that. You'll see down here that as we scroll through it, we have a dog here, we have a rabbit there, next up is another dog. We want all the dogs in one place, all the cats in one place, and so forth. So we're going to use grouping and sorting to accomplish that. You'll find that on the Grouping and Totals group within the Design tab. Grouping and Totals is over here, and here's our Group and Sort button. We can use this to make that arrangement before it spits it into the table so that the table appears in the order that the report appears in the order that we want. So I click that, and you'll see a whole new option opens at the bottom. We've never seen anything like this in anything with Access before. We have 2 options. We can add a group. We can add a sort. So what we want to do is we want to start by adding a group. This will filter out first the cats, then the dogs, and the rabbits. It'll subdivide for us. So I'm going to click that. And it just asks us, how do we want to subdivide here? We want them divided up by the type. That's the type of animal that they are. So we'll choose that. So we've chosen this. Now it's time to add a sort. So what we're saying is, first put the groups together, then do the sorting. So grab all the cats, and then sort all the cats by something. Then move on to the next pet. So we're going to sort by the ID field. So it's back down to the bottom, and you'll see that we already have this type sorted by A to Z. Now we'll add a sort inside that. And you'll see that a little outline is starting to take shape here. First we do this, then we do that. We want to sort them by their ID. So first we'll get the type of animal that they are, cat, dog, or whatever. Then we'll sort all the cats so that their ID numbers are in order from smallest to largest. So we start with 1, then 2, then 3. And that will allow us to look through the cats and then have their ID numbers assigned from the shelter all put in order. And we're going to have to customize this because there's one question that we haven't really dealt with, which is when you start putting these groups together, do we want to keep everything within the group on a single page if that's possible? What happens if we run into the end of the page? And we just have this More button down at the bottom where we can start specifying things like this. More gives us a whole list of options. I've just clicked that, and you'll see that there are extras that we can deal with, where we can include titles in different places, headers and sections, and footers and sections. Here's the issue with keeping things together on one page. These are rather large descriptions. You only fit a couple animals on a page. What if we have 3 pages of dogs? We just want to say that we're going to try to keep the header, which is that line across the top. We're going to try to keep the header and the first record together on one page. So we want to make sure that at the start of the here when we have the first record. Wherever the first record appears, we're going to have a header along with it. We just have to change this, where we say don't keep them together on one page, to make sure there's a header. And that gives us, make sure that took, keep headers and first record together on one page. And that gets us through just about everything at this point for this report. I'm just going to close the window, and you have to be careful. I mean, very careful here. When we're closing the window, make sure you're hitting the one directly underneath the scroll bar here. There's an X over here also. If you click that, you're going to delete the sort and eventually the group up above. So make sure you're using the right X. And we're back at the form. And when we scroll up to the top of the form, you'll see that cat gets its own line under type. And then everything you see down here are types of cats. These happen to be the same too. Then eventually we'll get to dog, and then it's going to be a list of the different dogs. And eventually, if you go down far enough, you'll start to see the rabbits get their own section. Here's the rabbits and the various types of rabbits. Now we don't see anything to do with the scrolling on the different pages, because again, in this view, we're looking at it all from the as a single unified page. But we'll notice more when we eventually see it page by page. So one of the last things that we're going to do to this report is we're going to add conditional formatting. This is something very common for people that use Excel an awful lot. We are going to make the form look different in places based on what's in those places. So for instance, this example, we want to make sure that these M's, whenever you have a male pet, the M's will appear with a dark blue letter instead of a black letter. And we could do multiple layers of conditions where if it's in female pet, it could change it to like a dark maroon kind of color so that we could quickly tell them apart. But we're just going to do the M, which mentions that we're going to click on the cell in the gender column, any one of them. Doesn't even have to be one that has an M. You could have picked one at lower on that has an F in there. And there's a conditional formatting button. This is definitely a format issue, since the conditional formatting has format right in the name. Here's a conditional formatting option. When we click on it, we're going to make a new rule. So basically what we're telling the software is anytime that a certain condition is met, there's an M in the box, we are going to change the color, and we'll actually make the font bold as well. So we want the new rule, and what we're going to do is there's a couple different things that we can do. We could either make a comparison, but we don't need to compare anything. We just need the one up top. Check the value in the current record. Use an expression. If that field value is equal to, we'll say a capital M. See, we're following these steps up here. Then what appears at the bottom is how we want it to look. We could change the background color, we could change the font color, bold, italic, underline. Here's a default that shows us what currently it would look like. We want bold and dark blue. Watch the sample here. We go bold, and now that's what it would look like. It would make the capital M bold, and we want dark blue. So now whenever there is a capital M in the gender box, remember we started by choosing the gender box, it will automatically turn the font bold and dark blue. I'm okaying that. Here's the sample. If the value equals M, make it dark blue. I'll get that out of the way so that you can see the M, and when I hit apply, you'll see it changes. I'm going to OK that, and just so that it makes it a little easier to see, here's Interesting that the undo doesn't apply. Even I'm learning something here. But we've clicked the OK, and we applied, and we OK'd. So now all that's left is to save the report. You see we're 2 out of 3 pages in. And we'll give one final thing. The report is 1 step away from being done. We're just going to add some analysis information here. We saw with queries that you can do a query where you just put in the information that comes out of the database table, or you can do a query where you will give some statistical information along with it. This is the same sort of thing. We have a report, and most of the things that we're putting in is just the data that we get out of the table. But what we want to do here, we want to add something that will tell us how many of each pet are up for adoption. And that's not in the database, and it's not part of our query. We're going to have to do that ourselves inside the report itself. So where do we want it? We want any text box in the pet ID column. And then we're going to want the total itself, which is going to be found in the sections up here where we're looking to design. Originally we did group and sort. Now we want totals. So it's just like the worksheet version where we're going to put some sort of calculation related to this box. Here's a bunch of different calculations that it can do, and these are a lot like what the queries can do too. You can add everything together, you can find the average, you can count how many you have, which is what we want, how many of these are available for adoption by the type that they have. You can find the maximum, minimum, statistical information. So we're just going to say count records. Now, when you look at what the report looks like, as you scroll down, you'll see there's a total marker over here that says 3. What is that? That's just it's just counting how many we have. And you'll see on their sample, they show the same thing happens at the end. There's the 3. So we are getting what it is that we want it to look like. And if I scroll down a little bit, just so you can see it's consistent, there's the 3 before dogs. If I keep looking for when we get to the last dog, here's where rabbit begins, we see that there are 9 dogs. And the same thing will happen at the very bottom of the report. There were 3 rabbits, and there's a grand total at the bottom that says 15. So we do have these count options available, and we could start getting into how to stick little labels on so it makes more sense for what they mean, but this appears to be the kind of document that we're sending out to other people, and we're not supposed to be really drilling down into feel guilty that there's more of these than there are those. So sometimes in your report you want to leave them hidden that way. Wouldn't take much to just add a little text next to it though. However, we're pretty much done with the report. They make sure that we save it again. And then we're just going to preview the final product. This is there's a View button, which is in the Design tab. We're going to do that, and we're going to head to Print Previews. So Design tab, and we are looking for the Tools Design tab, Views group. Go across. Views was the very first. And you'll see there's a Print Preview tab. Remember, we could also get that through that over here. But it says Print Preview, and this is going to really be just like when you're looking at it ready to go to the printer. So we switch to Print Preview, and we can see page by page what this looks like. When we get to the bottom of one page, we have to actually use the Go to the Next Page button, and we'll see what the second page looks like. And you'll notice a short while back we set it up so that the row of labels would appear every time you have a new page. So here's our row of labels. And we could flip through all the various pages of the document just by using the controls at the bottom. And then back to the start of the sheet. So we have a 6-page document here. The header only appears on this one, and way at the end, the page count you can see is there, and on the previous ones. So the footer appears at the end of every single page. The label appears at the end of the single page. Only this massive header at the top, the larger section, that's the only one that appears at the very start of the document and doesn't repeat. So if this was the target for us, we wanted something that looks like this, and these are the defaults usually that most reports will have. Notice that there's a one-page button so that we can start viewing what we would have together. If I click the 2-page button, we can see multiple pages at the same time. We'll leave it at the 1-page button, and now then we flip through. We've seen what our final product looks like. We just have to do the to close the preview so we can get back to work. But that's our finished report. I've closed the report with that little X. And this report down here is now complete. We just have one other thing that we're going to create. We can now get out all the information that we want from the database without giving access to the database. We just need a way for people to get information into the database. So we're going to create something in a very similar way called a form. And in this case, we're going to have a form that even includes a section that lists all the things that they're able to see. It's called a split form. What we'll do is we'll head over to the owner table. Now that we're making a form, just like we said to make the report based on this query, this time we're going to head straight to the table for this one, and we're going to create something new. So I'm switching to the Create tab, and I just want to create a form, but I don't want any of these defaults. What I want is, on the More Forms list, I want a split form. You'll see what the sample looks like over here. There's our data sheet item. Here's multiple items on the form. Here's split form. Puts a basic form up at the top where you can include data entry boxes, and at the bottom it contains a list of everybody that's part of the data set. So I choose split form, and automatically the form is created for us. I think this is one of the reasons why you don't spend an awful lot of time learning how to make forms, because it automatically, you just click the button and it makes it for you. When we look down here, you'll see that they took each of the areas in the pets table, owner ID, owner last name, owner first name, and such, and it just created places where you can enter this data up top. And that's all it took to make the basic data entry form. Now you could customize it, moving things around, dragging things from place to place, but essentially it's ready to go with that single button click. We didn't even have to walk through any sort of wizard or anything for this basic kind of form. So they do give a warning that depending on how wide your screen is, you might have these all in one row. And I've done it where I've just had the access window a little thinner, and it made it in one row. But if you had yourself full screen, you probably have these 2 rows. And I am just going to save the form like it says in step D. I'll hit the save button there. They give us a default name. They said that's okay for it, owner. So we have a form called owner now added to the list. And then we're going to switch to form view. This is just a view like we have with like datasheet view versus design view, and the queries get different forms. We have different views of this form. So now we're in layout view. Form view is the one that most of your users will see. I'm going to go full screen on this so that you can see both places at the same time. So we have the complete record able to be edited here. And at the bottom, we can flip through the various records that we have so that we can see all 5 of these owners. And you'll notice that as we click on the next record button, not only do we have all the information in here change, but you'll notice which line we're on at the table down below changes. Do it again, we'll see that person. This is one of the more advanced forms. If we hadn't chosen the split form and we had just chosen a regular form, all we would have gotten was what was up here. They're intentionally showing you one of the slightly more advanced versions that includes the table version of it below. And notice you can even do one more record, and everything appears blank, and it moves into the do you want a new record line. If you don't want the new record and you just went too far, you hit back, and it goes back to being only 5 out of 6. Forward, do we have a blank 6 out of 6? No, we don't want it. So it goes back to 5 out of 5. We can flip backwards through the others. So we're moving up and down on this list while we edit this, and whatever changes we made in here would be changed there as soon as we move to the next record. In fact, even if we just tabbed to the next box, we'd start making changes. So that's what the form is, and you can see it's just as simple. If we were to want to edit it, we could do the same thing. Just to preview that, there's a design view. Remember, you don't have to do this. And we have each of our boxes that we could move around, change the order, drag it to new places, almost like you're making a PowerPoint slide. So making forms is very simple. We just saw how to make one of the most advanced versions. So clearly the easier versions will be a lot less work too. Let's go back to splitting the screen up, and you'll see all they want us to do is close the form. I'm going to save the changes. The only reason there's changes for me is because I went into design view. I don't think you'll have to worry about that confirmation. We close the database. File, close. And it's time to upload the file. So it's back to SimNet, which should be there still waiting for you. Which file do we want to upload? Here's the animal shelter one that we just did. Make sure you have the right name and click open. And it's going to start uploading. Remember, databases always take a little longer to upload than the other sorts of projects that you're going to have to grade. And we just make sure, did we choose the right name? Are we ready to submit it for grading? And I'll submit it. Here goes the grading project where we're going to see how many of the steps we got right. Remember, there are always 3 submissions, so that if you do miss something in my class, you're able to go back, correct things, and see if your second attempt gets you a couple more points. I'm more interested on whether or not you learn how to get it right, not whether or not you got it right the very first time. So you'll see grading is happening over here, and it's starting to prepare the results sheet for us now that it knows our grade. And it's moving us on to see how we did. Here's another 100 in the books, as long as you followed along carefully. Remember, you do have the possibility to resubmit. But what I really would hope you think about, regardless of what the final grade is, realize that you've entered a new phase of Microsoft Access at this point. You have entered the phase where you've now done as much as you can to protect those tables, and you can now design forms and reports for your user so that they can put in the data that you want. And you could even, what you'll find out as you explore this further, is you can even set up the forms that we created so that they can only be used for data entry or just viewing. So if you don't want them to be able to enter data, you can limit the form that way. But mostly you've taken their hands off of the forms. If they want information out of it, they can get a report. They can print out the data in some way. You've given them access in 2 different ways to be able to access table information without making any changes that you don't give them permission to make. So we're really onto that new phase where we're letting people work with data instead of figuring out how to store and secure it. We have one last video in the series. I would recommend really having fun with this content. Go back into your file after you've got your 100 and start making changes like adding additional sorting, perhaps getting rid of the sorts that you have and changing it to sort by color or things like that. Apply conditional formatting so that the female animals appear in a different color. Really play with this. Maybe even make a couple forms on your own. There's so much that you can do with this that you can get lost in the just sheer bulk of possibilities here. I'll see everybody in the next video soon, and hopefully this content will serve you well in the projects that you take on.